collection of defeats. Dorothy loves Robert. Robert loves flying. Jiggs also loves Robert. Or maybe he loves Dorothy and Robert. Rock doesn't love Dorothy, and Dorothy doesn't love Rock. At most, it's a lie, even if the film sometimes makes the whole thing believable. Those are words from director Rainer Werner Fassbinder on Douglas Sirk's 1957 film, The Tarnished Angels. Seeing Faces in Movies is a podcast where each month I focus on the works of a different director or cinematographer, and each week I invite a guest on to discuss the film and the artist's filmography. I'm your host, Felicia, and today we're talking about The Tarnished Angels. A quick synopsis of the film is the story of the fraught friendship between an eccentric journalist and a team of daredevil flying acrobats. Tagline is, the book they said can never be filmed. Heart exclamation point on that one. It stars Rock Hudson as Burke Devlin, Robert Stack as Roger Schumann, Dorothy Malone as Laverne Schumann, and Jack Carson as Jiggs. It's written by George Zuckerman, based on William Faulkner's novel Pylon, cinematography by Irving Glassberg, directed by Douglas Sirk, edited by Russell F. Schoengarth, music by Frank Skinner, and costumes by Bill Thomas. Today I have Darragh McGrath back on, and well, look who's back on the show. You haven't been on since November of 2023. We are in currently October of 2025. This episode will be out in November of 2025. It's been 2 years. The audience might be wondering what happened. He was banned from the show.
I was cancelled. Yeah.
But we had to bring him back because he does have some knowledge on Sirk. So we're using him.
Yeah. Much like many cancelled people, you just take a break and you reflect and you learn and you listen. And then you're just welcome back without any consequences. So that's really,
Right. Well, we didn't get a notes app apology, so it wasn't real. Darragh's been on previous episodes, such as our first series on Billy Wilder. We talked about Ace in the Hole. We did a special features episode on Ula Grosbard's Straight Time and an episode on Cassavetes' Minnie Moskowitz. So highly recommend you go back and listen to those if you haven't already. That's a huge breadth of different films, different filmmakers, all films that I love and would recommend. But thanks for coming back on for this. I am curious to hear what your relationship is to Douglas Sirk. I know that you are a fan. Obviously, that's why I asked you back. But what your relationship is to his work, when you started really paying attention to his films, and how many films you might have seen so far.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for having me back. It's great. It's great to be welcomed back with open arms. It's always nice to be, brought back into the fold. But yeah, I'm gonna edit a lot of this. I think the first time I heard about Douglas Sirk was probably I watched when I was like 17 or 18 or whatever age. Watched Far From Heaven, which I think is a Haynes movie, and just all the reviews would mention Douglas Sirk, and all of the director would mention him too, and just be like, this was inspired by Douglas Sirk. And I didn't, I liked that film, but I was kind of interested in the kind of this old Hollywood director, basically, who I hadn't heard of before. And I did like the look of that film, and I wanted to kind of explore more. And it was a good few years before I even saw, I think, his big films like All That Heaven Allows and Imitation of Life. Even I think maybe even just in the last 5 years, they weren't the easiest to find for me. I'm trying to remember if I saw anything in college when I would have done a lot of film watching, but I think they were kind of hard to access, so I didn't see a lot of them until years later. And this is one that I watched almost just sort of not thinking it would be a big. He's got a few noirs and stuff early on that are they're good, but they're not really like Sirk films or what associated with him, I guess, in terms of like sweeping melodramas and all that kind of thing. Even though he's done a lot more than that. but that's kind of what he's known for, the big color and the, magnificent obsession and All That Heaven Allows. And this is a black and white Sirk film, and it's probably, I think, having rewatched it now just the other day, I think it's maybe probably my favorite film. Possibly, yeah. So
of his, I think it's, or in general?
In general. Overall.
Okay, damn. Okay.
Yeah. I think it might be one of the best films ever made.
I mean, I wouldn't disagree. There's a couple of points you mentioned that I do want to expand on, that we will talk about, not right this second, but the idea of is this a noir? Mm-hmm. And two, why is this not considered, or why would people not consider this as a Sirk melodrama? Mm-hmm. I think those are both very important points that I absolutely have in my notes that I want to discuss. But I think I've mostly said my background on the first episode in the series on Magnificent Obsession on Sirk, but just for people who might not listen to every episode, I first saw Sirk in university because we did themed weeks each week. There was a theme. Mm-hmm. Probably which stemmed my obsession with themes is just the way I was taught in school. But there was a melodrama week, obviously, and our professor showed us Sirk. And I've always liked camp. I've always liked things that are over the top. As an Italian, I identify with things that are over the top. But I don't think it was until I remember seeking out Magnificent Obsession after, but didn't really fully paying attention until I saw Written on the Wind in the cinema for the first time at Tough Bell Lightbox. I got to see that, and it changed my entire life. I was like, okay, this is the exact type of movie I want to watch. Tarnished Angels, though, I hadn't heard of until we watched it, and I am curious to talk about why it's not more well-known in his catalog, but it's not still as forgotten as a lot of his other work. Mm-hmm. But before we get into that, just getting into segment one, which is personal thoughts. If you are someone who pays attention to Sirk and his films, even if you're just looking at the big ones, like the big, I'd say 5, which are Magnificent Obsession, All That Heaven Allows, Imitation of Life, Written on the Wind, and Tarnished Angels. I would consider those are the big 5. Tarnished Angels would be the straggler, probably, but those are the big 5 that people know. We're talking about the American dream. Sirk is a German man who did not grow up in America. He grew up in Germany, lived his adult life in Germany, and immigrated as an adult over during World War II. I do give a bit more background, again, on the previous episode on that, but just like Cliff Notes, he was a leftist who did not agree with what Germany was doing. He was anti-Nazi, and he left. And he was begging to leave way before he managed to get to leave, which was like in 1940, which probably feels late for a lot of people because the war was already well into play at that point. But he couldn't leave for two. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I know if you want to get.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the leaving in 1940. I mean, I remember I read his the interview book that he did, and yeah, he had some pretty dramatic family issues there, where his wife became a big proponent of Nazism, and I don't know, she presumably joined the party and wasn't kind of an influence. Was heavily influenced by that philosophy and everything like that. And they had a young son who he obviously wanted to bring with him, and not being able to bring because the mother was there and they wouldn't let him bring the son. So he stayed, I think, to kind of with his family, and couldn't get his son out. And then the mother and the son stayed in Germany, and he left, and the son ends up joining the military and going to fight on, I think, the Eastern Front and being killed. So while Douglas Sirk is in America, so obviously that's a pretty traumatic thing. I think he spent years looking for him or trying to find out what happened to him, and eventually that's kind of what he finds out, I guess. But yeah,
yes,
pretty tough. Yeah. Does he ever mention what happens to his ex-wife? I guess she
She died of cancer.
Oh, okay.
Before the war even ended, she had passed away.
Oh, is that right?
Cancer.
Oh, okay.
Before that, he was a huge theater director in Germany and then managed to make his way into film. And he did a lot of studio German films. He wanted to get out, he got out, and he eventually made his way to America. Now, he, as an immigrant in America, he wasn't the only one within the studio system there. He started off at Columbia, and he was working with a lot of European immigrant directors, people like, Fritz Lang and so on. There's many, C-Mac and so on, that came over from Europe, leaving whatever they needed to leave. And it wasn't a complaint. It's more so he said that a lot of those directors just wanted to stay in Hollywood and keep their noses down. He wanted to explore America and he wanted to learn about Americans because living in LA, working in Hollywood, that's not America. That's its own country, essentially. He wanted to learn about Americans and their interpersonal struggles, which I don't even think are just American struggles, but they're the human struggles. So I think the idea of the American dream, though, is something that we all know, despite the fact that we don't live in America, we're not Americans. We all know what the American dream is supposed to be. And I think his films talk about that in a very patriotic way. The American dream is just essentially to be happy. And his characters all want to be happy. Whether they get that or not is up for debate.
I think he likes the idea of the American dream, and he likes America, but he's like, it doesn't really. He's like, he's just not sure if it can ever live up to the dream, basically. And I think that a lot of his characters struggle with that conflict of how life is supposed to be and how things are supposed to be. And you see that in All That Heaven Allows with the kids and everything, and then the reality of like, well, you have to live in this world and we have to be true to ourselves. And that might not fit in with certain expectations.
I don't think that he ever thought that the American dream could be achieved, as we know that there are many people today who are not able to achieve that American dream. And I think it plays into his casting of Brock Hudson, which I do want to get into. But before that, The Tarnished Angels is based on a novel by William Faulkner called Pylon. Faulkner is an incredibly American author, novelist, and he's talking about American life. I think that this story of characters who are kind of in the entertainment business that's not film business. It's not even theater business. This is just entertainment for kind of the middle to lower class. We're talking about flying planes. We're talking about fairs and the type of entertainment that you see at your local fair. That's probably looked down on a lot of people, but when you're in that system, and the way Faulkner talks about it is not looking down on these people. This is an incredibly important job for these people. So I think the story is so of its time because we don't often go to fairs anymore to look at performers. We go to fairs and look at rides and go on rides, but we don't see like performers anymore. And yet it still remains timeless because the conflict that these characters are enduring is something that we can all relate to. So in terms of Faulkner, and I mean, I haven't read the book. I actually would be interested to read the book. But in terms of Faulkner's story and Sirk and talking about American lives that seem very American, but we can all relate to, how do you feel that it translates in this movie?
I mean, you definitely get that feeling that it's if you have read any Faulkner, it does have that sort of spirit to it. I'm not sure if they got along very well, and I think there was a lot of like rewriting of the script and stuff like that. Faulkner obviously is famously one of the, along with who's the guy who wrote the F. Scott Fitzgerald, like writers who went to Hollywood and hated it and didn't get on very well with the studio system, obviously. But the characters are like, Faulkner always had that thing of like post depression, Dust Bowl depression, as did Steinbeck, and this actually feels very like a Steinbeck thing to me.
Yeah,
and Sirk, when you read what he has to say, also sounds like a Steinbeck type person who likes to go out and meet people and kind of find out what makes them tick. And then Faulkner kind of has more of a kind of mythic sort of feeling about things sometimes, which both work well together. And this does seem kind of like two kind of mindsets coming together.
I mean, well, he stayed out of it, Faulkner. He didn't involve himself with this. I don't think there was many rewrites. The only thing was that the studio didn't want it to be called Pylon. Obviously, they asked it to be Tarnished Angels, but Faulkner said that this was at the time, his favorite adaptation of his work. And he really liked what Sirk did because
he is credited as the writer, right? Faulkner is credited as the writer,
as the source material, but he's not the screenwriter. He's not.
Who's the screenwriter? Is it Douglas Sirk? Is it
no?
Or no? It's he's got.
It's George Zuckerman.
Zuckerman, yeah. So who worked with him before? Yeah,
but he liked this adaptation and the story. There's changes to the story, but the essence of the character still remains the same. Like it's still, as far as I know, because I haven't read it, hits the same beats, but it probably has a different focus in the movie than in the book. I know that in the book, Burke Devlin doesn't have a name. He's just an unnamed journalist. I think that Sirk buffed up that character because he probably found the most interest in his character because it seems like that's kind of a replacement for Sirk. I think that he
Rock Hudson is the audience. Like he's the in.
Yes.
Where you're coming into this world of the spectacle of the fair and everything like that, and these people who they call them like gypsies of the air or something like that. They're looked down upon, and you get a sense of that when he's at the beginning of the film when he's in the newsroom, and the editor is like, "No, nobody cares about this. Like nobody cares about these people." And Rock Hudson is like the only journalist alive who wants to do human interest stories because everybody usually you see stories about reporters and they just want to do politics and hard hitting stuff, but he's interested in the human interest aspect of it, and he's kind of the way into the movie and into these characters. And I find it really interesting watching it again how quickly they get into that and how quickly they humanize the characters. There's a scene with Dorothy Malone and Rock Hudson, and she tells them all these stories about how they're traveling, and it's just immediately like you're into the characters, you're into the movie, you're going along with them, and you really want them to kind of be happy and find contentment.
Yeah, what I like about this story, again, as someone who hasn't read the book, I like that it doesn't hand feed the audience. It doesn't need or feel the need to give us flashback scenes to be like, hey, this is how these two people met so that we can understand or want to follow them more. We just take them at their word, and it doesn't matter what their lives were even a day before this. We're being thrown into their story today because this takes place over the course of like a couple days, really.
Yeah,
it doesn't
like a weekend.
matter.
Yeah. It does do one flashback though, doesn't it? Dorothy Malone tells her story, and then they do a flashback at one point.
Oh, there is one flashback.
Yeah,
sorry,
and
when they're doing
the
dice rolling.
Yeah, and I did think it was interesting that they did that. That they.
I think that would be hard to describe.
Yes,
if you didn't flashback to it.
And you sort of need to see the sort of cruelty of the Robert Stack character.
Yes,
and the sort of self-hatred that he feels, and the kind of contempt. Yeah. You don't think, whatever. Okay.
I think he hates himself. I don't think that's an excuse, but we can get into that.
No, not at all. But he does, the kind of stewing anger that he has within himself, kind of, you can see it in that scene. Because he's kind of outside of everything initially, Robert Stack. He could almost be the villain if he was kept outside. Well, he is, to a degree, he is a villain. But, I think Douglas Sirk wants you to feel for everybody in the film, and even the rich guy who, tries to take Dorothy Malone. There's a sort of patheticness and sadness to that character where you almost feel sorry for him at times because he's just sort of so pathetic. And I think Douglas Sirk wants you to. I don't think there's anybody in this film who comes across as like purely villainous, even though they're doing villainous things, and that they could easily be a villain in another movie.
Villain in the most low stakes way.
Yes,
Like,
yeah.
they're
I
not
mean, they're not doing
actual
anything
villains.
evil.
They're like,
I don't think he's trying to teach, American movies a lot, especially back then. There was the morality of, you had a character do something like that, then they had to be punished. And this film, it doesn't seem to be about, even though things happen in the film later on, but it's not really about, they don't want people to feel like they're being punished. The movie's not trying to teach you a lesson about don't act this way, don't have a child out of wedlock or whatever they do.
yeah, I mean, I don't think that's ever even to question, but I know that he explicitly said that he never wanted to make movies that were about teaching people. He's like, I don't need to teach my audience jack shit. This is not what this is about. This is not the type of film I want to make. I don't even want to make a film with messages. This is just about reflecting human life back onto the audience to make them feel seen and heard, essentially.
I think Sirk's goal is similar to what happens to Rock Hudson in the film, which is that he comes into a situation that he doesn't fully understand. He has some pre-made ideas about what it is. Society has some pre-made ideas about what these people are like, and then as he gets to know them as actual human beings, his mind becomes expanded, and the experience of meeting these people opens him up to like a bigger world. And I think that that's what Sirk wants to do in all of his films, is that he would wanted the audience to come in and sort of give them maybe a situation that would be considered controversial or something like that, or difficult, or lowbrow, or whatever word you want to use, and sort of bring them into this and be like, well, these are just human beings who are trying to like survive and get what they want, and they're not trying to exploit anybody. They're just trying to get through things. And I think a lot of his films do that. He brings them into these kind of worlds.
No, I agree. I think that he is one of those directors who is very much interested in humans. And I know that a lot of his films were kind of, especially the big ones, were dismissed as, in quotes, women's pictures or weepies because they highlighted, I guess, human emotion and had men be vulnerable. And that's why they're so celebrated now, but they weren't then. And even now, like, we're talking about Sirk, and people we know who like film know Sirk, but a lot of people who know film still don't know many Sirk outside of the big, not even five, I'd say three.
Mm-hmm.
And still people probably haven't seen any Sirk at all. They just maybe know the name. So it's not like he's like a huge name, but he was kind of in the same vein as like a George Cukor or a George Stevens, in the sense that his main focus oftentimes was women. But I think in this film, what I do want to talk about just in terms of story-wise is the concept of fatherhood and what it means to be a parent. Because a lot of his films, kids are not really involved. And I've seen enough of his films that, like, I really think that this might be the only one where a kid plays at least a major part in the film. There are three main men, if we're not counting the rich dude in this movie. We've got Robert Stack as Roger, we've got Jack Carson as Jakes, and Rock Hudson as Burke. As far as we know, Roger Schumann, Robert Stack, is Jack Schumann's father. That's what we know, but the first scene that we see with Jack is Rock Hudson, Burke Devlin's character, walking in on him, kind of being bullied by a grown man. He's being teased by a grown man about who his father possibly
it's not other
is.
kids. Yeah.
No, it's a grown man who works at the fair, and he's being tossed around by this man. He's teasing about, oh, who's your real father? And he's saying that it's probably Jiggs. We come to know this is not the first time this ever happened, not even just with this other man, but other people have said this to him. They're kind of just making fun of him and his mother, essentially calling her as someone who's at the time you would call loose, and that Roger probably isn't his father. At the end of the day, the only one who is a real father figure to him, despite the fact that it's such a short time that they have together, is Burke. Burke is someone every time that they're in a scene together is actively paying attention to where this boy is actively taking into account his well-being, and he's probably the only man who actively talks to him. You never almost see Roger talking to him. You don't even really see Jake's talking to this boy. So he's his father figure, despite the fact that we absolutely know he's not his father. Wondering how you feel about the concept of fatherhood and how it's explored in this film within the story and how it's tackled between these three men.
Yeah, I think the way Sirk kind of uses the boy as sort of how all the different characters view him. So you've got Robert Stack is sort of sees him almost as a sense of shame. He feels kind of he doesn't connect with him at all. I mean, do they even talk to each other in the movie? I don't even know if they. But the kid obviously, the kid obviously idolizes him and wants him to be his father, whether he is or not. And then Jig is sort of like strangely, not, I wouldn't say cruel, but he's sort of when later on when Robert Stack dies, he's sort of just very sort of callous about it. And he's like, oh, they haven't even found the body. And the boy is like obviously extremely upset. And he's just sort of like almost like it's just an everyday event. And then so there's these different types of fatherhood that you've got going on, these archetypes almost. And Rock Hudson is maybe a new version of a father who actually might care about his child's emotions, which back then this movie is from 1957 or something like that, and
but it's not set then.
It's not set then. That's true. It's set in the 30s, I guess. Yeah, and then Sirk deals with that in some of his other. There's Always Tomorrow as well, with Fred McMurray. But this kid is just like a young kid whose only life has been these fairs and this kind of lifestyle. He sleeps on the floor or under the bed. He's got these two father figures, neither of whom are particularly strong in the sense of like making him a good, rounded, emotionally secure individual. He's got a lot of like negative male kind of tropes going on there with those characters. And then the Rock Hudson is the first kind of man he meets who actually seems to care about the well-being of him and his mother. And he's got his mom who obviously cares about him a lot, and he kind of dotes after her. And she's pretty cool too, so he could be idolizing her as well, because she does some cool stuff in the film. He does. He watches her jumping out of the plane, which is a great scene.
I think he does.
He obviously loves her.
It's difficult, and it's interesting. In another time, she would be the main focus of this, because it's kind of just like, this is not a fault of the film. I think it's not even a fault of the book. It's just a product of its time, where it's like, oh, this woman is actually doing dangerous stunts. Whereas Robert Stack's character is more celebrated. And I'm like, he's in a moving thing. There's like a lot of people fly planes. This woman is actually fully risking her life.
And you do see the at the beginning of the movie, or near the beginning of the movie, there's a huge crash, a plane crash, pretty much caused by Robert Stack's character, flying dangerously.
It is.
It is caused by him, not pretty much, but it is caused by him. And that's sort of like just almost like a suicidal sort of thing that's going on, where these pilots are just willing to die just for, all they're doing is flying around for a small crowd of people for not a lot of money. They talk about, they're basically living day to day. Yeah. So there's like a desperation going on.
Berg's character says to Laverne specifically, it's like, you did all that for like $20.
Yeah.
Now, this is also, in a much earlier time where $20 is quite a bit, but it's still probably not enough for what he thinks is like risking your life.
Yeah. She jumps out of a plane and then loses the parachute, and then has a second parachute. It's part of the act. But part of the act is that she free falls and you think she's going to be killed. And then that's the, which could go very wrong, if especially back then in those days.
But I do find the concept of fatherhood, especially as we know about Sirk's concept of being a father. And I don't know how much he ever talked about the fact that he was a father once he got to America. I wouldn't blame him if he never told any of his colleagues or people there that he ever had a son or was previously married, because it's an awkward conversation.
His son was part of the Nazi army. It's not something that he would want to.
But I think it's interesting the way it's tackled here, because especially with that one flashback scene, Jigs does say, if you're not going to marry her, I will. And we all know that Jigs wants to. And I think that he would have stepped up. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have, but I would like to think he would have stepped up as a father. I think the reason why he has Jack at such a distance is because he's like, one, I don't fully know if this is my son. And two, Robert Stock's character, is going to lose it on me if he thinks that I'm trying to be a father figure to what he knows as his son. So it's like two people battling each other. I think that Roger is in the wrong the most because, as far as we know, that's the son that he raised. Well, that Laverne raised, that he just is there as the father. But Burke is the one that shows Jack that there is a male figure in his life that can provide him love. He still doesn't get Burke in the end, but he doesn't really need that. He needs his mother, who he's with, and who's always going to be there.
The Jigs character is an interesting one because you kind of see different shades of him. He could very easily be played for just like sympathy, but there's a sort of possessive thing going on that he's got going on, and you see that near the end of the movie as well, where he just sort of, and it's kind of like he's being curdled into sort of the rejection and the humiliation, I guess, that he feels every day. The first scene with Darragh McGrath telling that really like sad story. He's awake and he's listening to it and he's hearing it from her perspective and stuff. And he's hearing it from her side. And there's just this real sense of, you don't ever feel like any of the characters are bad. You just feel like sorry for all of them. Because they've got themselves into the situation where they're sort of reliant on each other, but they shouldn't probably be around each other, any of them. They should probably, other than Dorothy Malone and her kid, they should probably all just be going their separate ways at some point.
And that's why she said to Burke, I don't know if he asked or she just brings it up, that if Jigs had won the roll of the dice, would she have gone with him? And she said no. Well, because in her mind, she always wanted to be Roger anyway, because that's who she was in love with. But also, I think that she just knows that it wouldn't have worked. So it's interesting how that plays out. But I wanted to talk about the outdoor element to this movie because I think it's important, and on location shooting, because a lot of this takes place outdoors. Not that that's super different to a lot of Sirk films, but a lot of his films filmed in America were studio films. They were all studio films, and they were shot on lots. And what he liked about shooting in Germany when he was there, that was that he was able to travel to shoot, or he was able to shoot outside. And he did say that, which I found really interesting, because rewatching his films, I was like, I really wish he had shot like a huge sweeping Western, something like Giant, something like The Big Country. So I think that melodrama and Westerns are, they're not even essentially, they are the same genre, but just different font. And he did shoot Westerns, but not grand sweeping ones. And I think that he really should have been given the chance to. And he said that if he had been an American Hollywood director, he would have been a Western director, which I think is very much on par. And he loves shooting outside. So a lot of this is shot outside. It's probably the most extras I've seen in his films, even like the war ones where there are extras. But this has like a lot of extras because it's a fair. So there's a lot, like a whole town of people.
And there's a kind of there's a creepiness going on in the fair too, with the guy with the mask.
I mean, I think
these very strange masks. Yeah. Towards the end of the movie, you have that one guy who grabs Dorothy Malone to pull her back, and he's wearing this kind of freakish, faceless mask thing. It's like kind of scary. But I do think Sirk is he's similar to Ford in a lot of ways, but I think he would have made you're right that he would have made a really, really interesting big Western. And I think
like a Howard Hawks Western more so than Ford. I think he has more character in his camera than Ford does.
Yeah, I know. He doesn't do that kind of hangout thing that Hawks would do a lot, though. But, or there's the kind of humor that Hawks had as well. I mean, him and Ford both had the kind of, that melodramatic sort of itch going on.
I mean, he said he was a huge Ford fan.
Jubal, was that the movie, the Western with who was in that? Was it Glenn
Ernest
Ford?
Borgnine?
And Ernest Borgnine. That's almost like a Sirk plot going on in there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Actually, yeah.
But yeah, I think he would have made I think that's almost like the great unmade film of Sirk's career, is like this big Western.
He really should have. I'm genuinely like rewatching it. I really wish he had been given like a 3-hour Western.
Yeah, yeah. The Big Country is a good call. I think The Big Country. Who made that? Was that?
It's William Wyler. William
Oh
Wyler
yeah,
made
William Wyler. Okay.
and William
Yeah.
Wyler and Douglas Sirk
Yeah.
are. I can't believe I didn't bring William Wyler up when I talked about his counterpart to Joyce Stephen, because William Wyler and Douglas Sirk, those are two of my biggest favorites. William Wyler, even more so. William Wyler is, to me, one of the epitomes. He's like probably my second favorite director after Brian De Palma. And if you know anything about Brian De Palma and you know William Wyler, you're like, okay, this bitch loves drama. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
William Wyler is so like, and their counterparts. It's not like they probably influence off of another. It's weird that I didn't hear too much of Sirk talk about Wyler at all. I'm sure he knew and was aware of his work, but they are so similar. And they're both immigrants coming into the country and talking about American culture.
And they're both kind of famous for being women stories and stuff like that. I think the Big Country, if anybody listening hasn't seen that, you should absolutely check it out. I think Indicator or somebody released a Blu-ray of it, and it looks amazing. It's the closest you're ever going to get to a Douglas Sirk Western. I mean, you should check out all William Wyler stuff because it's great. But that I remember, I think you'd seen it already, and you told me to watch it, and it's probably one of my favorite Westerns. Yeah, it's so good, and it looks amazing, and it's very big and dramatic and colorful.
I would agree. Like, I watched it years before we ended up rewatching it together, and I watched it. I don't even know if it's because of William Wyler. I honestly think it was because of Gregory Peck that I watched it, but it's long enough. It's almost 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And typically those type of movies, I try not to break up movies, but sometimes life happens. But I sat and watched all three, and I couldn't believe it. I love that movie. And I do agree. It's the closest you'll ever get to a Sirk, an actual Sirk Western, not the Westerns he did. Like something like Tad the Son of Cochise, which I talked in the previous episode, which is good, but it's not what Sirk could have made. But I think that although the point of this point was to say that I think the outdoor space kind of becomes its own character within this movie. It's not an overbearing character, and it's not even a character you're fully paying attention to, but it requires the outdoor space because we're getting to know a lot of the characters when they're in Burke's apartment, essentially. And there's a little bit of scenes at the newspaper room or building. But most of it's taking place outside, and that's where you get to see the action, and you get to see what these people do. And Sirk shot, like I said, a couple Westerns. He shot some war films. You're not going to think of Sirk as an action director, but there is one phenomenal action shot in this movie. It's so quick, but I didn't notice it the first time, but I've been watching it. It's when the first crash happens, the one that you talked about. And he clips off that guy and he crashes the plane and his body flies out towards the camera.
Yeah. It's like a dummy, but it looks like it would be.
Oh no, it looks fantastic.
Yeah,
I was this is so well
shot from the ground. Yeah.
So I think the outdoor space makes a lot of sense. And I know that's something that's the type of film that he always wanted to shoot and make. So this being later in his career, I think makes a lot of sense. Obviously some of it was shot on sets, but those shots with the planes, even the fair, that's obviously outside.
He does something very simple where when the characters are inside rooms just together, that's when they express their emotions. And when they're outside is when they're closed off and there's a lot of bargaining going on and there's a lot of like people trying to convince people of other things, and you know the rich guys trying to get Dorothy Malone, and they're trying to like there's a lot of bargaining going on when they're outside, and they don't and the only time you see like an expression of pure emotion is at the end with Robert Stack when he says that he loves her and he's getting in the plane to basically he's gonna die. And that's the only time outside where you see an expression of emotion, and the child being terrified for
except for Jack. Jack's the only one who expresses emotion all the times.
Yeah, everywhere. And then when they want to talk about their feelings, they go inside to small little dark noirish rooms and they let it out there. And you see that with even with Rock Hudson's character, he gives that great speech at the end where These days you'd call it Oscar bait, but I mean, it's like so well done. He kind of does his story. He kind of recites his story that he would write that he's not allowed to write. Yeah, but it's sort of it's a simple technique, but it's subtle enough that you don't even realize he's doing it. I don't even, because I've watched it a few times now, and you were saying that about how he uses the outside as a character, that it's like that is kind of just a very simple but effective technique that a lot of filmmakers use. They do it today even.
Talking about shooting, we need to talk about Irving Glassberg, who is a cinematographer on this. I want to call him out because his is not Sirk's usual cinematographer. He worked with Russell Meddy quite often. So all of the big pictures that we've discussed already or mentioned, and then a lot of the ones that we didn't talk about were shot by Russell Meddy. Irving Glassberg shot this one in black and white. I tried to find out why he didn't use Meddy, because it's not like Meddy couldn't have shot in black and white. It might have just been a scheduling conflict, and he couldn't get him for this.
He was making a lot of movies around this time. Douglas Sirk, he was making like 1 or 2 movies a year. Yeah.
And it's like Meddy could have just not been available for this. But Irving Glassberg, who's made a few other films that I've seen, but nothing of real note apart from Tarnished Angels, would be the biggest one, to be honest. You mentioned something at the top about noir elements in this film. Rewatching it, because I think sometimes this gets classified as a noir, and I personally do not think this is a noir.
Yeah.
It's not a noir at all. It utilizes noir lighting. And I think a lot of films that are kind of post-noir, because this is released in 1957, which is at the point where they're still making film noir, but it's not at the height of film noir. It's at the point where people are utilizing the skills that they've crafted throughout that genre in terms of lighting. And we're talking about shadows and soft focus. And we get a lot of that, especially in the scene where Burke and Laverne are both on separate. She's on the couch talking about her life. He's on the chair. They're kind of head to head, not facing each other and talking about, and we get the lighting on both of their faces, and it looks like a noir, but there's zero noir elements to the story.
Irving Glassberg looks like just looking at the letterbox there, he looks like he shot a lot of noirs, actually. So
yeah, that makes sense. But I think it lends to the idea of, like, a lot of people might not think this is a melodrama because it's not as heightened sometimes as his other as Sirk's other films, but I think it's very much still a melodrama. And I think film noir, again, is melodrama.
The visual aesthetic is that for a lot of people, melodrama is the all that heaven allows, magnificent obsession thing with the colors and the big sweeping color. And this visually kind of has more of a noir look, just a very clean, deep focus, lots of light, like using the lighting in a really interesting way. You know, they do the thing with the light, the blinds and stuff a lot. Light coming through the blinds.
They use a lot of natural lighting, or they use lighting within the actual set pieces. They're not doing the lighting outside of it. It's like someone turns on a lamp and it illuminates their face. Yeah. Which is very film noir. It's not something like lighting in the background that we're not seeing. This is the light that we're actually seeing being turned on.
And Dorothy Malone is shot often like they would shoot a not a femme fatale, but a female character in a noir movie.
Yes.
Like the love interest or whatever. Yeah. Like a Lauren Bacall.
Well, yeah, exactly like Lauren Bacall would be shot. She didn't intend to shoot this in black and white. The studio didn't believe in the story. Yeah, and they said, we're not giving you money for color, which is interesting that the studio was like, hey, if we don't actually really care about the story, but we are like, whatever, you can still shoot it. We're like, you can do it, but we're not giving you money for color, which makes you now think about a lot of other films where you're like, why was this one random one shot in black and white? I think to myself, actually, I'll save it because it's going to be brought up as one of my double bills. So I'll save that.
I wonder, did it give him more freedom with how he told the story as well, if they didn't care that much?
He said that they gave him full
control,
and
it was almost like he just wanted to make it, so they let him make it. And he made it after Written on the Wind, he made it after Written on the Wind, right? So which is a lot of the same cast, basically the same cast, plus Lauren Bacall, and a similar kind of love quadrangle in that film. The two films are quite related in a lot of ways. It's been a while since I've seen Written on the Wind. I have to watch it again. But that's such a big, colorful film, and the colors really like pop. And then he made like almost like I feel like Tarnished Angels maybe gets seen as sort of like just a leftover. You took the same cast and you just made a quick black and white film or something like that. It could be construed that with a similar kind of setup in terms of the plot and stuff like that, where Robert Stack's sort of a self-destructive character, you know. Yeah, but I think this film is probably not as, I think if people are going to be they'd probably just recommend Written on the Wind, and it's kind of like, it's around the same period, it's a similar setup, it's the same cast. I think this is it's not really, it doesn't matter if it's better or worse or anything like that, but I think this absolutely stands on its own as its own thing. I think it does have something different to say. I think it's more direct, and I think it's more kind of shows you what Sirk was really about in a lot of ways, which is that kind of empathy and that humanity. And I think it's just a more straightforward film, which isn't always a bad thing.
I mean, I think, to be honest, this is the most Sirk film in the sense that if you know who Sirk was, if you only know what the films he makes, you're not going to think of this as the most Sirk film. You're going to think of any of the 3 or other 4 that we mentioned.
I think this has distilled all of his themes and all of his characters and all of his interests, and it's very just focused and very direct. It's 95 minutes or something. It's all in there as a sort of like big statement, I think.
I think it just also reflects what his interests were and what he liked to actually talk about without any sort of extras. It's very direct and to the point. One of the last points I want to talk about just in this section, and I'll pass it off to you if there's any other personal thoughts you want to talk about. We'll still talk about the story as we go on, but we've already kind of talked about performances, and I think this is very much a performance-based film. A lot of his films are, but in different ways. If we think of Written on the Wind specifically, everyone has to be kind of at the top of their game, shouting over each other a little bit because it's such a loud film, because those are loud characters. This is very quiet. It's incredibly quiet, this movie. And I think that the performances need to come across in a very way that's not showy. We've got 4 main actors: Robert Stack, Dorothy Malone, Jack Carson, Rock Hudson. Robert Stack, who comes across as very stiff and emotionless, and this even more so than he would in Written on the Wind. He kind of just seems like if you're watching this for the first time, you probably just think that he's probably I don't know. I thought maybe the first time I was like, oh, he doesn't seem like he's on the same level as the other 3.
Really?
But I think it's because he's very stiff in his delivery, because it's how that character would be like, though. I think it is a good performance.
I think he's really, really great in it. I think he's got that sort of, it's a tough job to do because did they say he's a veteran? Did they say he had been in the war, or is it?
I don't remember that.
Am I making it?
I don't remember.
But he has this sort of thing. He's broken. I mean, there's things that he wants to say and there's things that he wants to do. And I think deep down he loves Dorothy Malone and he wants to, for whatever reason, he's a broken man and he cannot get past it. He cannot get past himself. I think he is his biggest, worst enemy. That's a very interior sort of character to play. It's a very difficult character to play. You don't have, in a more traditional movie, he'd have his big breakout, anger scene, or he'd have his big breakout meltdown, or he'd have his big, whatever. And he does have a big emotional scene at the end, but a lot of it is put on Dorothy Malone and her face. All he's got at the end is to, he has a very distinct choice at the end of the movie where it's like, do I land on the ground and possibly survive, or do I veer off into the thing and kill myself?
I think he did that because he knew that would be the best thing for his child and his wife.
Yes. Yeah.
That's his revenge.
I think he's like, I don't want to.
You think he cares about those random people?
He could have potentially killed his own, Darragh Malone and his kid, I guess, but he doesn't know exactly where they are. But yeah, I think, he's got a choice between like, what kind of man do I want to be right at the end? And he makes the choice to sacrifice himself.
Just quickly touching on the other 2, not to dismiss them, but I do want to talk about Rock Hudson a little bit more and then move on. But Dorothy Malone, who previously, the year before, won Best Supporting Actress for her performance on Written on the Wind. Which, the performance she puts on in Written on the Wind, she's my favorite in that movie. Here is very nuanced and layered because she knows she has to pull back a bit, but she still pulls out the stops when needed. But I still think that it's kind of unfortunate that she's not kind of spoken about in the same vein as like this could have been like a Katharine Hepburn role, or someone like a Betty Davis, Joan Crawford. Lauren Bacall, I don't know that.
I don't think she would have been as good. I think,
to be honest,
I do think the two actors are similar. I think Dorothy Malone, they have similar voices and stuff like that. I mean, the only reason I haven't mentioned Dorothy Malone yet is because I thought we were saving it, because I think she is by far like the best thing in this film. We haven't talked about her a lot so far, but I think in a film where you've got a lot of like, you're working with a lot of actors, and it's the time is kind of spread out between everybody. And Rock Hudson has his big speech at the end, and I think she does more with sometimes saying very little, or just like the camera's constantly on her, seeing her reaction to things and seeing how Robert Stack's cruelty, or the kind of Jiggs's Jack Carson's his sort of like kind of pathetic sort of neediness thing going on, and you see her reaction to everything, and you see her response to everything, and this sort of feeling of entrapment that she has. I think she has the hardest role in the film, and I think she does the best job in the film with it. She's got a lot to work with, and she's got a good director who knows how to work with strong women characters. But she's the heart of the film. She's the focus of the film in a lot of ways.
I mean, I agree. That's why I've never seen Dorothy Malone not put on a good performance, and it's wild that she's not spoken about. Okay, Jack Carson, who, if you are a film noir fan, I know we've been talking about the genre a lot, but if you are a film noir fan, you have seen him in several movies. He usually kind of plays a second fiddle detective. He's not often the lead, and he's not the lead here. I feel bad because on the poster we have the three leads, and then it just says "and Jack Carson," despite the fact that he's just as important. But I get why it really is about the core three, and because the story kind of treats him as the leftover. But I think he does some important work. You've already kind of talked about it, so I don't know how much we need to expand on it, but he does a lot of nuance where it's not like he's not just playing for sympathy. There are times where he is obviously very resentful, within reason and sometimes without reason. And I think Jack Carson really puts on a performance where he hasn't really often been given that opportunity in his career. And I think he's able to be given some space to actually show his chops, which is, I think, Sirk's forte. Last one I want to talk about. I know you said that I think these two performances for me are on par. I think on this watch, I preferred. I hate saying preferred. I think this is the one that stuck out to me because I'm watching these movies through a different lens right now than I would have in the first time, because I'm looking at different things for this series. But Rock Hudson's performance in this really blew me away because he's an actor. If you know anything about his career, even outside of his Sirk films, he was always kind of cast as the, I wouldn't say jock, but pretty boy, nice boy guy you want to take home to your parents.
The all-American.
Without seeming like very much all-American man. This man was 6'5", very good looking, very well put together. He's always fully shaven. His hair is perfect. He is Rock Hudson. He looks like a schlub here a little bit, as much as you can make Rock Hudson look like a schlub, because
his
it's very
clothes
difficult.
aren't
And I
fully
see that they're trying to by putting on. They have this man in a cardigan. I was like, sir, this man does not. I'm sure he probably did wear cardigans maybe in his real life. You mentioned his speech when he's in the newspaper room. He comes back and he's drunk. I don't know if he's coming back to beg for his job back, or if he's just coming back because that's where he's most comfortable and he's drunk. And he sees that they've written a headline about Roger Schumann dying, and he goes into a whole very Shakespearean speech about what his article would have been like. Reading about Sirk and his love of Shakespeare and his love of literary works and adaptation, this seems to be like his Shakespeare moment where he gets to give a character this sort of speech, because a lot of his characters do have speeches, but they're not like this one. I thought this was very different from a lot of his movies. And it's interesting that he gives it to Hudson's character, Now, I don't know, this might have been in the book, but I feel like this is Sirk and the writing team giving it to this character to give him that gusto because it makes sense for him to have that sort of speech. I think that Hudson pulls it off beautifully, and it's really a shame that the only time, as much as I say this on the show all the time, the Oscars are trash and they don't mean anything, but they also same time do. The only time that he was ever nominated for an Oscar was for Giant, which is by George Stevens, who we mentioned before. Phenomenal
Great
feature. If you
performance.
haven't seen it, very highly recommend. Very good performance, but I think he pulls off an equally as good performance in this movie. I think that you don't need to be showy, and he's not showy.
I think it's
in this
extremely
movie.
effective. And
One
even though I
showy
knew it was
speech.
coming this time when I watched it again, it still got to me. It still was like really, really, because he's a writer, right? He's a journalist. This is the story he was gonna write. This is what he wanted to get across. He wanted to get across the emotion of these people and the emotion of the story. And he does it so well. I mean, it's one of my favorite, I think, speeches that, like, one big dramatic speech in films. They're always fun to watch, but I mean, he does it so well here, and he doesn't let the performance take over from the emotion of it, I think. And it's basically hitting you pretty hard at the end, because you've seen all these things happen and you feel, for all of the characters, but he like sums it all up in this one big kind of thing. And he kind of delivers the kind of the punch at the end that you need to kind of, that lets you like leave the film with the kind of a feeling of something.
Segment 2, which is before and after. I have to assume that if you're listening to this, unless you're a huge Sirk head and completist, you maybe haven't seen either of these films yet. Right before he does The Tarnished Angels, in 1957, he does Interlude. This stars Gene Allison and Rosanna Brazzi. It's essentially, I'm not going to spoil anything in this movie. I'm just going to give you a very quick synopsis. It's about an American woman who goes to Europe, as one does, to work, and falls in love with an Italian composer, as one does. But things seem too good to be true. Now, it's kind of shot a little bit like Sirk's color films, but there's a Hollywood sheen to it that you don't see, especially rewatching Sirk's films. There's something that's not Hollywood about his movies, despite the fact that they are Hollywood films. There's something where the ones that he actually was passionate about, there's some sort of layer of Hollywood taken out of it, whereas it's not taken out of Interlude. So Interlude, if you read anything about it, and I wouldn't recommend reading anything about it if you haven't seen it or don't plan on seeing it, but people didn't seem to like it. Critics didn't love it. It's a perfectly fine movie. There's really nothing wrong with it. It's like an hour and a half. The issue is the casting. So we talk about how Tarnished Angels casting is perfect, and even his other
generally known for
of the big five
good at it.
Good casting. Gene Allison, who I really like, and Rosanna Brazzi. If you don't know that name, if you've seen Summertime, the David Lean film, he's the Italian in that. Gene Allison is kind of a Judy Garland-like. She has that kind of very raspy voice, and she always kind of plays. I like her. She plays a lot in rom-coms, comedies. She's kind of a more of an aw shucks American. And her character is supposed to kind of be like, oh, I'm not ready for Europe type of situation, but they have zero chemistry together, and it just doesn't read well. And I hate to say it, but it's her fault. She just seems to be in another movie. The movie gets gusto when it brings in Marianne Cox, who, if you haven't seen it, it's not going to make sense, but if you have seen it, once her character comes in and the tone that she's given, if that tone had been not even just kept up, but more elevated in this movie, I think it would have been one of his top movies because it's so freaking good, her character. But he did this and he shot this in Europe. So this is one of the few instances, I bring this up mostly because this is one of the few instances where when he's working within the Hollywood system, this is Universal film, where he gets to shoot outside of America. He gets to shoot on locations there in wherever they shot. I don't even think it was Italy, to be honest. I didn't look too much into it. I bring this up because in the previous episode of Magnificent Obsession, the two movies, the one before and after, he was a director for hire situation. This is not so much like he was given this project, but he, at this point, could say yes or no. Before he was like, well, I have to kind of accept whatever I'm given because I'm not really given much. And if I don't accept, then I won't be able to make what I want to make. So he's able to say yes or no at this point. It could have been good given a different cast. And I hate to compare it to the David Lean. It's because of Rosanna Grassi and it has to do with Europe, but it needs someone like Katharine Hepburn who has more gusto, who can handle the situation better. June Allison I just was like kind of pissed off because I was like, girl, what are you doing? I don't know what movie you're in, but you're pissing me off, even though I like her a lot. I don't want to dismiss the movie. Definitely watch it. It's very short. There's nothing wrong with it. What he does right after this is what is probably more interesting. So right after The Tarnished Angels in 1958, he releases A Time to Love and A Time to Die. So this is a war film. It's about a German war soldier during World War II who starts to question his faith on the side of the army as a German soldier. The first 20 minutes of this film are insane in the sense that it's those first 20 minutes. If they had kept up that tone and that energy, it would have been, I think, a war movie that people would still be talking about today because it's one of the best shot 20 minutes I've ever seen in a war film in my life. And then it gets into the love story. And it's not a problem that it gets into the love story. It's just that it doesn't keep up that tone. And it still is a good movie. It's just that it's so hard to come down from such an intense thing to then follow these two who fall in love. You do need that opening 20 minutes to understand why now this character is going to be like, oh, actually, I'm a Nazi, but I don't really believe it anymore. Where you actually believe it, where it doesn't feel rushed. It's interesting because at that point, I don't know if he'd done any real straight up war films, and especially any modern war films. Making like a Roman Empire or like a Western, like a Cowboys and Indians one type of war film. That's so far removed from his timeline. But this is very close to his life, and he said that he didn't write this movie, but he kind of made it as a tribute to what he hoped would have happened to his son. That he hoped his son would have turned around as a German soldier and questioned what he was thrown into.
Yeah.
Which makes it sad when you watch it.
I mean, I really want to see that movie. I
read it that
I do
way.
remember him talking about it in the book and stuff like that, and it did sound like it was very...
It's good. I very much recommend it. It's one of the longer ones of his. It is just over 2 hours. It's like 2 hours and 10 minutes, but it doesn't ever feel like it's dragging out. All the performances are great in it. And fun fact, it features a very young Klaus Kinski, who I hate, but he's obviously playing a German officer in one of the more sinister scenes, of course, where he shows up and you're like, I'm scared.
Is he over the top? Is he, he likes to, early on in his career?
No. Yeah. No, he puts a gun. No, he's not over the top. He's very good in it. He's not.
He had screen presence. That's all you can say about Klaus Kinski. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he's in the opening credits, so he might have been, and I just didn't notice. But when he came on, I was like immediately like, "Oh my God, Klaus!" Because you cannot. No one looks like him. Only he looks like Klaus Kinski. This again is another one that's not a director for hire. This is a picture or project that I can't remember if he sought out himself or it was also, again, a lot of the times the producer would just be like, hey, this seems like something you would want to do, which is like a lot of filmmakers at the time. The way he approached it in the story, he said explicitly he had his son in mind the whole time. And you can, if you don't know it, it's still a good movie, but when you know it, it adds such a huge layer.
This is another European film? So he went from...
It's funny because I don't even know if this is shot on location. To be honest, it seems like it's probably mostly sets. And it's most like it's actually he might have gone to Germany for it actually because a lot of the actors are German, but anyone with a major part, except for the woman, the love interest, are all Americans playing Germans, and they don't put on German accents. They're just like one guy sounds like he's from deep in like the Bronx, and I was like, sir. With all that saying, it's interesting to put those into context because right after that, he then makes his very last film, which I won't get into because it's not too relevant to this conversation, but he gets it. He does Imitation of Life, which is his very last film. So, which is one of the big five. I do think that A Time to Love and A Time to Die, it's interesting that that's not considered one of his bigger ones because it's very good, but it doesn't have the sweeping thing like Imitation of Life or Tarnished Angels would. It's more along with Tarnished Angels, but still it's very different. If you know Sirk, you're going to see the Sirk in it. But if you don't,
I mean, he was really great at endings. He always had like very big emotional endings that
has a very good ending.
The credits come up and you're like, oh God, he was always good at that. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of his reputation, or even just when people think about old Hollywood films, they're probably thinking about like that kind of Sirk ending where it's just like, Imitation of Life is a great example. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just to put into context where he was at in his career. This is Tarnished Angels is 2 years before his very last film. So he was on the come down, not of his own volition. He just, even within his time, was already starting to be forgotten, and he was forgotten for ages until people like, I wouldn't even say until people like, but there was other directors, something like people like Fassbinder, who owes his entire career to Sirk and has never been quiet about it. He said explicitly, I've always been trying to make Sirk films. And then people like John Waters, who explicitly are saying, this is my Sirk film. I don't think he really became a topic of conversation until Todd Haynes kept pushing, hey, this fucking Sirk, what I'm doing, I need to pay attention. And then we get people like Criterion.
Do you think, I mean, I always thought, I was going to mention it earlier too. I mean, Blue Velvet, like David Lynch's stuff, there's like Blue Velvet feels like
David Lynch,
two Douglas Sirk characters put into the David Lynch's world. I mean, the way they talk, the way they
Blue
talk,
Velvet is a Sirk,
the colors, everything. I mean, it's very like a Douglas Sirk film, Blue Velvet. And so many of the elements of Sirk's films are present there. And that scene where, that famous scene where, and this is one I always talk about with David Lynch, and if you've watched Blue Velvet for the first time, I'm always interested in how you interpreted the scene where they're in the car and they're talking about, Laura Dern's talking about love and how love is like birds flying, and it's like, do people laugh? Do people get carried away with it? And then when that movie came out, and there was a view of David Lynch as being kind of like, I don't know, not to make this into a David Lynch thing, but that he was being kind of sarcastic, or that he was being sort of like John Waters might do, where he's sort of being kind of sly about it. And I think the actual my interpretation is always that he's being 100% sincere, in very much the same way Douglas Sirk is when characters are talking about their emotions. They're letting it all out. This is their moment to like kind of, they've kept it in for so long, and now this is like 100% sincere. David Lynch or Douglas Sirk is not looking down on the character or being contemptuous of the character or making fun of the character. He's like, this is what it means. This is all it is. Laura Dern does a great job in that scene, and I think you see that in a lot of like, it is a melodramatic scene. It's a melodrama in that moment, I think.
I mean, David Lynch is also a probably more apt comparison, but not more apt. The other two directors, the other three that I mentioned, are very much apt, but one that David Lynch, everyone knows his work. Blue Velvet is his Sirk film, and something you talked about, when you're watching certain films or certain scenes in that film, are you going to laugh at it? I think that I don't want to get too much of it because I'm going to rage out if I do. And I don't really want to rage out, but I think that's very much when we talk about melodrama, it's interesting to see how certain people react to it, especially either in a group setting like a cinema or just talking to people and how they react to certain films. Nothing is disgusting me more than people laughing at Blue Velvet.
Well, there's some scenes where they laugh where it's just not.
There is humor in Blue Velvet.
It's disturbing, but people laugh when they're uncomfortable.
Because people are immature, but people laugh.
No.
Okay, I don't think that's an excuse. I'm not saying you do that. I think that's such a sad or lame ass excuse that people like to say. It makes me really sick that you could be laughing at certain scenes. The scenes that they're laughing at Blue Velvet, I'm like, or they'll laugh at Fire Walk with Me, and I'm like, this woman is quite literally
good example of like almost like a Sirk household family getting thrown into the nightmare world. I mean, that's got Douglas Sirk written all over it as well. Look at me. Yeah.
Yes. I think, Lynch, I don't know if he's ever explicitly talked about Sirk.
He never talks about other movies.
Wizard of Oz.
About the movies he claims that he never saw any movies growing up other than The Wizard of Oz. He claims that he doesn't watch movies. Yeah, he's 100% like. There's no way that he's not. It's like he's one of those guys who just like lies in interviews and he doesn't care. And I kind of agree with it. I think it's funny, but yeah. But there's no way that he didn't watch things like Giant and things like, Written on the Wind or Imitation of Life or anything like that. There's no way that he didn't see these movies and be influenced by them.
He 100% did. He 100% did. He didn't make this in a vacuum. Anyway, I think that's a good jumping off point to the last segment, which is or segment 3, trademarks. Because I think sometimes a lot of Sirk's trademarks are very obvious, but I think they become more obvious with a lot of directors from this time. They become sometimes more obvious when you see other directors playing on them. So that the plays into, David Lynch doing a Sirk film or Fassbinder or Waters making their own Sirk films and seeing what trademarks that they recognize in his work that they want to highlight and incorporate into their works. So stuff we've already talked about, but maybe if you have any that you noticed, there's a couple that I want to talk about. What he loves the most and why those big 5 that we keep talking about are the most popular is his love of the average American life. Now, he's not talking about poor people, okay? He's never pretended to be talking about these are poor people, but these are usually middle to upper class. They're not the richest. Sometimes there will be always like one really rich character in it, and there might be one really poor character, but these are people with some sort of money at their disposal, why they're able to have time to actually, think about their emotions, why they're able to actually be enveloped in their emotions as opposed to being like, oh, I actually need to go to work.
The Tarnished Angels is one of the few films that actually deal with this. Their economic back
people working,
which is that they're all sleeping in the same room, kids sleeping under the bed. I mean, she's sleeping on a couch basically. They're all sharing beds. I mean, this is the only film where you kind of I don't know, but it's the only I haven't seen all those films, but generally it kind of stands out for that reason. I mean, Written on the Wind and all those other movies, they're all quite rich, right? They're all living in nice houses and stuff. There's Always Tomorrow, they're supposed to be middle class, but I mean they're well off. But with this film, it's like there's a sort of the desperation that they feel where they're just like trying to get by and they're trying to get to the next town or they're trying to get to the next job. And he does acknowledge, I think, that, they don't have time to be sitting around. It's still happening, all the stuff with their emotions and all the stuff with their relationships. It's still happening in the background. They're just kind of hurtled along this sort of these jobs that they have to do, and they have to, she's got to go and jump out of the plane. I mean, that's what she has to do now, regardless of whether she's upset or if she's, anything else. She's got to go jump out of that plane and do the parachute trick.
Had Burke not come along, these things and these feelings would have still been there, but they didn't have anyone to listen to them. They didn't have an audience. Burke becomes their audience, in which case he's a reflection of us, like you mentioned. Because who is listening to them? They're always together. They don't want to talk about each other's feelings. They don't want to talk about their past because it's dark for all of them. And who's going to talk to them about it?
And low-level people, I mean, the way they're treated by or talked about. And then for Burke, it's his writing, his journalism is a way of him expressing himself, because he's not really telling just the facts of the story. He's trying to get across the humanity of it, and it's not just printing facts about like this guy died in an air crash. He's trying to get across humanity of what's happening and the situation that they're all in and the difficulty they all have, living this kind of lifestyle, and that, these people need to be like seen as human, that they're not just like props for your entertainment kind of thing. Yeah. And in fact, like their lives are just as important, and their relationships and emotions are just as important as well-off people or Shakespeare characters or whatever it is. He gives them as much space and room as well as you would to any of those kind of people.
One of the last things that I want to talk about, just in terms of trademarks, because I kind of already discussed it earlier in the show, so I don't really need to repeat it, but repeat use of actors. I briefly mentioned that he was a quite famous theater director in the 1920s in Germany, and he used a lot. And same, if you're maybe not so much today, definitely not so much today, but back in the day when you were a theater director, you had a theater troupe of some sorts, and you're kind of reusing the same actors. We see that even today a lot in film, where directors will return to the same actors. What we saw here, obviously, we get 3 of the same actors that were in Written on the Wind, which is the year before, but his partnership is mostly known for his use of Rock Hudson. They were like, I think they did 8 films or so together. And he's portraying different roles in each time. And I think maybe to the naked eye, without sounding like dismissive, you might not see the difference in a lot of the roles. But if you're actually paying attention, if you see them more than once, you can see that he's playing different roles each time. Just wondering.
I think he could see that
partnership.
Rock Hudson could both be like the reliable sort of steady, immovable. He call in the book he calls them immovable characters, where somebody else is chaotic and there's a character in the middle who's immovable, and that's where a lot of the drama comes from. And he used Rock Hudson that way a lot, and then other times he would use him. I think this film especially, Tarnished Angels, he allowed him to kind of explore a little more depth, and I think sometimes it's too simplistic or to kind of apply an actor's real life to their film work as if they necessarily they didn't write the script or they're not the director. So it's like, but the director, Sirk, would have known Rock Hudson, and he would have known him, the real Rock Hudson. So I think he knew that he was capable of maybe having that kind of depth and that sort of duality that you see sometimes in the characters. I haven't seen all of their films, so it's kind of hard for me to speak to all of them. I'm sure earlier on he maybe is the dreamboat, or he's the steady character. But with this film and Written on it, he definitely gives him more to do. I think he thinks Rock Hudson is probably like reliable, but also thinks that there's a lot more to work with than maybe other actors or other directors would necessarily. Once back in those days, you had a type, and once you were the type, that was it. That was your character, and you played that character in every movie moving forward. And I think he knows what Rock Hudson's type is.
Yep.
And he uses that to his advantage. He kind of plays with the idea of the Rock Hudson type as well.
No, yeah, I agree. I think that I know he had said that he saw him in a movie. I can't remember what movie it was that he saw him in, and that he said he saw something in him, and he cast him in. I think it's About My Gal, which is more of the kind of rom-com that he was known for. The stuff that he did with Doris Day type of films. But he gave him the room to become an actor that was respected. And I think there's only, in my mind, 3 directors who actually respected his work, which is Sirk, George Stevens giving him that role in Giant, and John Frankenheimer giving him the role in Seconds. Frankenheimer probably not the most, but like doing that movie is whatever. That's very much a Frankenheimer movie, but being like, I'm going to cast Rock Hudson, that's a choice. I don't want to give too much to people who haven't seen Seconds. That's another recommendation I think we both would agree on. People should watch Seconds. But if you like his performance, I think Rock Hudson was
probably seen as like definitive, to a certain degree, the definitive American man. in terms of how he was perceived, and that's obviously a lot to carry for a gay man of that period as well. Like that's not something that would be easy to sort of shoulder. As opposed to like some of the other actors like Kirk Douglas and stuff who all had like, you know, they had like a menace to them, or they had a, both in real life and but anyway, but you know, they all had sort of, they came from maybe crime films or whatever, or Humphrey Bogart or whatever, you know. He had this sort of like straight-laced all-American quarterback sort of look to him, and he wasn't boring, though. You know, that could come across as a very boring. It is kind of a boring character.
Well, he's essentially the nice John Wayne. Yeah. They had this
John Wayne without the kind of grit or whatever. Yeah.
John Wayne decided that he wanted to go more gritty. Anyway, any last words from you on the Tarnished Angels before we go to the
I would encourage people to seek it out. I know it's been on the Criterion channel. Kino Lorber have a Blu-ray of it. I'm sure you can buy it online somewhere if you need to, or get it from your local video store if you have one. But I think it's Douglas Sirk's best film, and I know he also said that actually. Douglas Sirk said it's probably his best film. I think it's his most accomplished. It's his most definitive statement, if you want. And I think it stands out because it looks amazing. I mean, it's an incredible looking film. It's separate from a lot of his most well-known films because it's not in color. It's in black and white. And he uses that amazingly. I think the performances are all amazing. I think it's if you're going to make a case for Douglas Sirk as a great director, I think this is the film I would put forward, because I think all of the elements are there. The story is great. I think it's just a very kind of sad, bittersweet story about a bunch of people who love each other but can't be around each other, I guess. It's kind
of... Last question. If you're building, let's say, a double bill with this movie, what film or films are you pairing it with, and why? And do you have an order?
I have two films. I have the obvious one that I think you would probably also come up with, which is Ali, Fear It's the Soul by Rainer Werner Fassbinder.
Oh,
okay. Well,
okay, that's another one.
That's the more obvious one, because I think it's directly influenced by Sirk, and it's. I mean, I could have said Blue Velvet as well, I guess, but I think that's maybe a bit too different. I wouldn't pair the Tarnished Angels with that either. But for me, I really only had the only one I came up with was Lonely Hearts, Montgomery Clift film, where he's I have it here. I know I brought the Blu-ray, even though we're not doing video for this. But it stars Montgomery Clift, Robert Ryan, Myrna Loy, and it is directed by, who is it directed by? Vincent J. Donner. I don't even know who that is. Anyway, it's another black and white film from the same period. It's about Montgomery Clift as a journalist. He's a Lonely Hearts writer. Basically, he becomes a Lonely Hearts writer, and he gets to again, it's a similar thing where, you know, they're sort of contemptuous of the people who write these letters, and he gets involved with some of the writers of the letters, and he kind of broadens his mind and his experiences by meeting these people. And it looks great. It's underseen, Lonely Hearts. I think we just randomly watched it one day, just out of nowhere.
Not randomly. I'm trying to find finish.
Kino Lorber once again have the Blu-ray, and it was pretty cheap when I bought it, so it should be easy enough to get. I bought it from Bay Street Video, and I just think that like thematically they're kind of similar, and I think they both have that sort of similar,
they are,
you know, human empathy touch that the Sirk does so well. I think Tarnished Angels is the better film. I'd probably put that on second. Go out with one of those big Sirk endings. So
that's fair. I mean, I'm kind of annoyed I didn't think about Lonely Hearts. That is a good. Both of
I've always tried to outdo
but that's not what I thought
with the double bill picks. So yeah.
Okay. I thought we were
really? Okay,
for
I'm
sure going
interested.
to have the
Yeah.
exact same too. Okay, so the first one I thought of, which I think is at least obviously to me, obviously, but I know that it's not one it's probably even, not even probably, it's very much less seen than Tarnished Angels. Speaking of John Frankenheimer, his
Oh yes,
1969
yeah.
film, The
I was
Gypsy.
gonna bring that. I was gonna bring it up
I thought
earlier.
that was going to
Actually,
be
yeah,
on
when
your
you were talking
list.
about the plane jumping. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and Burt
Yeah.
Lancaster, because
Deborah
this is
Kerr.
about,
Yeah.
plane acrobatics and their lives outside of just being plane acrobats. It's essentially kind of like a continuation
Mhm.
of Tarnished Angels. Not the same type of characters, but they sort of have
It
the
is
same
quite similar, actually, isn't it? Yeah,
beats.
yeah. And you have to, yeah,
Quite some. I would definitely watch. I don't know if I'd watch Gypsy Moths first or second with that. I feel like you
yeah,
maybe want to
yeah.
watch a second. No, I think Tarnished Angels is better as much as I like Gypsy Moths, but I feel like maybe just being like,
Mhm.
let's go through time. So maybe I'd recommend it. And then the other one, which I thought you were gonna put, this is leaning more into the journalistic aspect of the story and a journalist who essentially butts into people's lives.
Yeah. I thought about that. Yeah,
Ace in the Hole
I thought
is
about that.
about there,
Yeah,
1951.
yeah,
I thought that those were there. I was like, oh, these are kind of very
I feel
obvious
like Ace in
ones,
the Hole
but I'm glad that we didn't
has
have.
that element of it's yeah. There's
Also has a fair in it.
similar kind of things are going on in it, but I think the whole purpose of the film is maybe geared towards more of a different thing than I think. It doesn't really like its
That's
characters, I
fine. That's
guess, is
fine.
maybe the difference. Or it doesn't. No, they
But I don't
don't.
think double bills need to be the exact same.
That would be a great double bill.
Thing.
I'd love to see Ace in the Hole and Tarnished Angels back to back in a song. It'd be amazing. Yeah.
I mean, so would I. Those are both very good black and white movies. But thinking, because I'm very pissed off that I didn't talk about. I know we ended up talking about him, but I'm actually genuinely pissed off that I didn't bring up William Wyler because that's my love. I was like, okay, I gotta add at least one William Wyler one. The one I was thinking, because I'm looking at his filmography, the one that stood out was, it's odd because it's not the most perfect double bill, but I think if you're thinking of male loneliness epidemic,
Yeah.
I would think of Dodsworth, which I think is a fucking
Have I seen that?
masterpiece. This is 1936. Yes, it's with Walter Houston,
Oh
where his
yeah.
wife keeps cheating on
I love
him.
Walter Houston. Yeah. Oh Jesus. Forgot about that one.
But
Yeah.
this is more so like a man who kind of comes across, oh my God, I don't know how
Really?
you forget
Wow.
about that
Okay.
movie. I think about it all the time. I love that movie.
Oh
I
yeah.
would put it up
I thought
there
you were
with
going to
the
say The Big
Heiress.
Country, just to
It's
because it's
Dodsworth and
got
the
the
Heiress for me.
or Jubal or something like that. Jubal would be another good one.
Yeah, I think I would just say
Yeah.
watch The Big Country. We've already said watch The Big Country and watch Jubal also. Those are both great. That was Douglas Sirk's 1957 film, The Tarnished Angels. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
You're still in pending mode.
I'll see you in 2027, listeners. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, let's leave podcasting then. Who knows? But thank you so much for coming on and lending your knowledge
Thank you.
about Douglas Sirk to the series.
Oh, thank you.
I do
It's the nicest
actually
thing you've ever
appreciate
said.
Seeing Faces in Movies is an official podcast of the Aurora Film Club. It's hosted and edited by Felicia and Roney, with intro music by Lamar Walker. If you like what you heard, let us know at seeingfacesandmovies.com or send us an email at seeingfacesandmovies@gmail.com. And while you're at it, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to your podcast. And stay tuned for our next episode on All the Heaven Allows. Watch more movies, and we'll catch you next time.